So it doesn't matter how Supreme Court will rule, this will go into effect. I mean, the process you just described, there will be, there will be controversies in the states, and the state legislator will raise those questions, and then they will have another election. Is that right?
Well, I mean, let's just um, take again the state of Arizona. Um, the case in Arizona can go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court can make a decision. But if the Arizona legislature says we don't agree, in that case, the Arizona legislature still has the power to sit the slate of electors that would vote, right? And so the court can decide many things, but ultimately this is a political process. And it's the political branch that will decide to accept the decisions made by the Supreme Court. Now, I'm not saying the state legislatures would openly or wantonly reject the Supreme Court's decisions. They'll take those into account. But again, that's part of the political process we're going through here. And so this will play out in a variety of ways over the next several weeks, and it's going to be very interesting, and it's going to have a lot of twists and turns as we talk about in that 79 days report, which you can find on claremont.org. The website, the report is on there, and we lay out a lot of different scenarios. Ultimately, I think at the end of the day, the political process as it currently is not the process, but the players within the process, just the current majorities, I think are actually going to lead this election, lead electors down to voting for President Trump.
Right.
Because that's simply the logic of the system, given everything that's transpired and the evidence we have before us.
So
and I think by the way, I think a state legislature, if they actually thought, or a Republican state legislature, if they actually thought Joe Biden had won that state, I think they would ratify the votes for Joe Biden. But if after examining all the evidence, they believe Donald Trump won, that they'd send the voters for Donald Trump.
Okay.
And so I have a lot of faith that the political process can work here and decide the right things.
So you think the country will likely go down this path? Will the election will eventually be decided by state legislatures?
Well, just given how hard it is to decide, when you get like 100,000 mail-in ballots and they don't have valid signatures, what do you do then? And you're finding that in a variety of these states, that honest people are going to say, well, how do we know that someone just didn't turn these in? Where are the signatures? How did this work? Let's examine the evidence. The media keeps saying, show us the proof. Well, I would say, look at the evidence. The evidence is there. It's not proof until it's adjudicated in a court of law or by the state legislature. Let the system play out. I think, frankly, a lot of folks don't want the system playing out because they know if it does, President Trump will get reelected. Right now, the media and the Democratic establishment is doing everything in their power to try to make it seem inevitable that Joe Biden won. And I think they're really setting the country up for a kind of crisis that people are going to think, some people will think, well, Joe Biden got elected. Whereas a lot of Americans, I think there are 75 million people who voted for Donald Trump who think that he won. And when the courts and the legislatures actually vindicate that, we're going to have a real condition in this country where you could have violence and mayhem and rioting. And we envisioned that in that report that we did, because there's not a clear winner in the minds of half the country.
Right.
And so anytime those conditions exist, you have the conditions for a lot of turmoil.
Right.
But again, let's trust that the American people in our elected branches can think through this and ultimately decide in a fair and open way who won, using our Constitution and all the safeguards within the Constitution. we have a system that was it was not set up to deal with dishonest people, if you know what I mean.
Right.
Once you have a lot of dishonest people who want to rig the election on one side, there are enough vulnerabilities that can happen. We're not talking about someone bringing an extra ballot to on election day. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about the ones and twos of people trying to vote illegally. We're talking about an organized effort to penetrate, corrupt, and invalidate an election by using cyber capabilities to hack into the systems, change the votes, and have us believe that that's the real result. And I think what you're finding in Wisconsin, for instance, is that the system was reconfigured so that a vote for President Trump was given to Joe Biden. Not every vote, but they created a computer program that would move some votes from President Trump to Vice President Biden.
And make it very
and
natural.
I think that system was used nationwide. It was vulnerable to cyber, hackers who were able to get in there and change the data. Well, let me be clear too. A lot of the data, half the votes in the country were processed on servers in either Barcelona, Spain, or in Frankfurt, Germany.
What?
Just the processing of the ballots.
Really?
There's a company called Clarity Elections, and it's owned by a company called Scytl, SCYTL. They process about half the votes in America through these same kind of systems, but they don't do it in America. They're done through Scytl is a company in Barcelona, Spain, that went bankrupt, it turns out, in May of this year and was bought in October of this year, weeks before our national election, by an Irish company. And they're the company that's processing about half of all of our votes here in this country. Now, I think if most Americans knew that, their heads would blow up, I've been telling people, because they would just think, how is that possible? It's getting in the news more and more.
Okay.
You saw President Trump tweeted today, earlier, a big tweet about Dominion voting systems.
Right.
And so that's in the news. But of course, as I said, that's a Canadian company. How many people know about that? Not very many.
Right.
And then you have the data processing through this company called Scytl, or Clarity Elections is its American subsidiary. But the fact is, Americans are just learning about this now, and they're learning because they can't believe the results of the election. And you had this anomaly on election night where votes, they stopped counting, and then they started counting hours later. And the numbers, as you were pointing out, simply don't add up. And so Americans are trying to figure out what went on. And so you have a lot of people at the state legislative level examining this. The campaigns on both sides are examining this. The only people not looking at this, other than the Epic Times, is the mainstream media, who doesn't seem to care and who simply wants to make it look like Joe Biden won. And where are the honest journalists, other than people like you, who are really digging into this to try to find out what happened? Now, all that having been said, I think at the end of the day, we will find out what happened.
Right.
And I believe still in the American people and their ability to sort these things out.
All right. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.